copy of it.
Looking at some of the evidence that we can put our hands on that can show us that we are really descendants of the running ancient, the running Egyptians.
Yes, document came out in 1939. A guy that went to the University of Chicago named Theodore P. Ford, PhD. Yep, Theodore P. Ford wrote a book called God Wills the Negro. And in that book, he gave a great synopsis of what went on in Kemet during the last invasion, which would be the Arab invasion of Kemet. And in so many words, what happened was a lot of people fled Kemet. The Egyptians fled and basically went in mass to West Africa. And in so many words, what the book is saying is that once the slave trade came years later, that the West Africans, in so many words, when the slave traders came, they allowed the slave traders to capture the Egyptians, the Hemmites, because the Egyptians were homeless. They didn't have a home anymore. So let's just say that you are a leader or a king. Your loyalty and your responsibility is to the people in your tribe, your kingdom, or your nation. So since the Hemmites were no longer in power, didn't have a nation because it was overrun by the Arabs, they were looked on as homeless. And so some of the chiefs or the actual kings gave the Egyptians up as some of the first slaves because their loyalties was with the people that they had to rule over. So as a result, some of the first population of the Americas and of South America, of Central America, South America, North America, but especially especially Central America and South America, were in large Hemmites or Egyptians, based on the people who gave them up said, you know, they don't have anything we don't have anything to hide. These people are homeless. Or we're not really losing anything. These people are not a part of our nation and they're homeless. And these were very advanced people, people that had a certain air about them, that even if Theodore P. Ford said, it raised certain attitudes towards them as being people that were so advanced till other tribes or other nations got jealous of them and had no problem enslaving them or catching them and capturing them for the white slaves.
So we're talking about perhaps 15 to 1800 years later.
Yes.
You know, somewhere from 13
yes.
to
Exactly.
1800 years
exactly.
later. How would they still be a homeless people?
Homeless as if they might not necessarily have been indigenous to the area, and to the point where as they probably set up their own state. But remember, because we know the Dogon, case in point, is descendants from the ancient Egyptians. You know? Because even the Dogon even say that they came to the West Africa during the time of Timbuktu from Kemet. You see, from Kemet. You know we talk about people that have a profound oral history. West Africa and East Africa. So the West Africans, the doggone sure know who just got there lately. Even if it's 1,800 years. You see what I'm saying? they sure could tell who just got there lately. For the simple fact that you know, even in modern Africa right now, customs are very important. You might go up the street and do something, and they might love it. And you might do the same thing up the street in another area, and they might offend somebody. So we're talking about people that literally can identify new people to the area even 1,800 years later just by their customs. And these people had to have been some people that if they were Egyptians, then there had to be no mistake about it. They were some very sophisticated people. And this is where Theodore P. Ford is saying that there was some jealousy going on. You see what I'm saying? I'm much inclined to believe him on this particular aspect. Number one, he went to the University of Chicago. He went at a time in the early ages of Egyptology, even at the beginning of the 20th century. It went at a time of the early ages of Egyptology. We're talking about around the time that Rockefeller was pumping a whole lot of money up in there, who basically, literally, built the School of Egyptology with James Henry Breasted. So this person, by him being a person that is at the University of Chicago at a time when it was not...
Actually, it was 1990.
Yeah, 1919. University of Chicago at a time when, because the book came out in 1939, at a time when it wasn't even popular for blacks to even be in some type of program like that, because today it's still not popular. We have only a few people. So therefore, he would probably be able to get a little more access to things back then than you can now, based on the political aspect of them, the Europeans, knowing that we're looking for our ancient history. And he was probably the prototype in the model in which the Europeans looked at and said, we're going to make sure that nobody else gets deep into this particular information to write this type of book, because the government came in and confiscated the majority of the books of his book in 1939. This guy even went as far as to showing the black women in Chicago at the time. It's not so much far removed from slavery. You're talking 1919. We're not talking about people that could be amalgamated in European features. We would even say that before 1950, there was probably tons of black people, you see what I'm saying, with the original stock of the original phenotypes of Africans. In the South and in Chicago, because you remember now Chicago is a great migration point from Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia. You see what I'm saying? New York is a great migration point. You see what I'm saying? From South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia. So in Chicago, we still have these Southerners that is migrating into the North. And this migration period, although it was a great migration, it's probably started as early as the late 1800s. It probably wasn't a boom, but they've always had a migration pattern. And we got to also break this stuff down, that things happen as spiritual. So we can't never rule out the possibility that everything has to be on a European left-brain scholarship in the way that things happen. Things happen spiritually. Now, in his book, he showed the phenotypes of Chicago women, black women from the South, put up against statues and drawings at the University of Chicago of the Pharaonic people. And it was an uncanny resemblance. You see what I'm saying? It was an uncanny resemblance. I mean, you know, There is no way that if they, let's put it this way, if we argue that these people had European mixture, they still wouldn't look like the Egyptians. And if they didn't have it, then where did they get these phenotypes from? They got it from ancient Kemet, because this means that we had a heavy Camite or Egyptian settlement in America. Give you some other history other than that one. And I try to, because history is always an ongoing process. I think whenever we say, no, this is absolutely, positively the way history is, history shows us different.
Correct. Yes.
And it busts up our thesis. You see? Now, we know that these people, the Egyptians, had full access to the earth. We have maps that is drawn on the complete earth, of the complete earth. Thousands and thousands of years old. And there's only one way this could have happened. Number one, they got it from a concept of space, or they actually traveled the globe. Now, one of the other stories is coming that I got from Memphis, Tennessee in 1993. Now, I don't let people tell me how scholarship is supposed to come to the conclusion of how scholarship is done. There is such thing as empirical evidence, case study, field work, and anthropological study, where you get certain things based on folklore, based on narratives of people in geographical locations, just as authentic as you find on a rock or some type of artifact. Now, interesting story, when I was in Memphis, Tennessee in 1993, doing a lecture down there. Did a lecture for the Nation of Islam. Sister came through, one of the sisters of the community. She invited me to a house on the Underground Railroad. And we went in the house, and I did a lecture in the house, and then she took me downstairs where the slaves used to have to hide out in the basement. And she shut the doors on a couple of us, and it was pitch black under the house. And she even mentioned that how they had to either drug the babies, or by keeping the babies drunk half the time, or they have to knock them out if company came to the house with the white man upstairs. And these babies started crying up under the house. This particular point on the Underground Railroad, it was said that they made it to this particular point in Memphis, Tennessee, that it would be a breeze to go straight up north, undetected. But they had to go through rough terrain from all parts of the South to make it to this particular house in Memphis, Tennessee. This is a woman that did the history on this. She said, what made this house so special was one thing that we witnessed when we went up under the basement where the slaves used to hide out. It was actually railroad tracks up under the house. And she's saying that this house could very well be the house in which the word Underground Railroad was named. Because there was railroad tracks under the house. We actually did see this. And we know the house was one of the last stops in Memphis, Tennessee, before you go on into freedom in the north, where the other safe passages. But if you got to that particular house, you pretty much could bet that it was going to be an easy ride. But she told me a curious story. A white person knew about her, knew that she had done a lot of work in the black community, and knew that she was about uncovering knowledge of her people. And she said somewhere in the late 80s or the early 90s, white guy was dying, and he called on her because he'd seen pictures. She always saw her popping up in the newspaper, uncovering this and uncovering that. She had already done a whole lot of publicity and a whole lot of information on that Underground Railroad. So he called her at house. So he called her over. And apparently there was a little island in the river near Memphis. And the water subsided and the island got bigger and bigger and bigger. The University of Tennessee, which got the big old glass pyramid down there. You've been down there and saw this thing? And in the statue of Ramesses, that the president of Kemet gave them a replica of Ramesses. They went and excavated the land, and they dug up a lot of ancient black bodies. In that land, on that island in the river in Memphis, Tennessee. The lady went on to say that based on legend has it, that when the Europeans got to Memphis, Tennessee, they didn't name Memphis, Tennessee based on their knowledge of Memphis, Egypt, or Memphis, Kemet, based on them being Masons or whatever. In this particular case, what happened is, the legend has it, is when they first settled the land, the Native Americans, or the Native Indigenous people that we call Indians, or the Native Americans, said that this particular place is called Memphis. And they insisted upon it that this place was to remain Memphis. And it was the Native Americans that taught the European settlers about Memphis. And they went into the story. This is remarkable stuff. It went into the story that at their first beginning of whenever they migrated in, there were these Egyptians living on the land in Memphis. That was a subsidiary of original Memphis, Egypt. It's hard to say because we have to find out the period of when these particular Native Americans got there. So it had to be a very early period, probably a couple of hundred years before the European settlers got there. So it's not going to be that hard to do the work on when the Europeans settled Memphis. And they said, the story goes that this is Memphis, named after groups of Egyptians or black people that was here when we migrated into the land, the Native Americans. And the story goes that, as you know, in Africa and in Egypt, they didn't have a real jail system because certain things were taboo. So somebody says it's kind of hard to believe that death is taboo because we have so much people being murdered around us till it's a way of life, until it's kind of hard to perceive that death can be taboo. But if you just notice black people right in the 20th century, before the 1980s, we had several things in our community we just didn't do. You know, there's several things that was taboo, and we could go on and on list of things we just didn't do.
What is that?
For an example, let's even talk about killing. Now, John Henry Clark said that he believed that